Hello, my name is Thomas Osborne, and today I'll be talking about a male bias in video game advertising. And this is for the Sex and Gaming seminar at the University of Iowa. So, what the male bias in video game advertising is, it's pretty much just like a tendency for game developers and their marketers to target their advertising toward the male audience in their video games instead of the female audience. And this has been going on for a very long time, ever since like pretty much video games first came out. I'll be talking a little bit more about why later. But now let's first talk about how we're going to examine this bias. So we're going to look at a couple of different game genres. We have RPGs, which are the role-playing games, FPS, which also stands for first-person shooter, and then we have sports games and strategy games. So the reason we're going to be looking at role-playing games is because they generally have both male and female customization options at the very beginning of the game. And what's also very nice about this is even though they have these options, neither one really affects the story or the gameplay at all. It's just the character model that you choose to play the game with. And so this way, like, it's very apparent if there's a bias toward it because the gender really doesn't affect the game at all. First-person shooters we're not really going to be looking at because you generally cannot choose gender at all in these games. There's a recent exception in the recent Call of Duty game, but that's just like one game that has like this option available. Normally those are all male, which is another bias, I guess. But we're not going to be talking about that here. This is just for advertising. And then sporting games and strategy games. These ones aren't really relevant either because, at least for sporting games, the gender depends on the game and the sport that you're playing, so it's not really relevant. That's kind of like on a game-by-game basis. And strategy games, you don't really choose like whatever race or character you're playing because it's all about the skill set of that race or character. And so even though that there can be a gender in whatever avatar you're playing as, it's not really relevant at all to the gameplay because you only care about the skill set. So now let's look at some role-playing games. Here we have for the most popular game, like most recent games in the franchise, for some of the four most popular role-playing games on the market. We have The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Fallout 4, and Mass Effect 3. And so just right away here, looking at these four pictures I have on here from the advertising, they're all male. So yeah, it's pretty obvious right here that the cover art that these are all using and the game art for Mass Effect 3 is showing off the male avatar. And this is like pretty, it's pretty much a standard throughout other game advertisements too. If you just go on like pretty much any game website and just click on role-playing games and just like scroll through the games they have, they'll generally have pictures pretty similar to this. Just some kind of like background from the game and then the male avatar on there and then the words of the game right there, what it is. However, and like this is also like the same for all the trailers, they always have the male avatar on there too. So now let's look at, there is exceptions to this though, which is pretty notable because that means that the bias is maybe starting to go away a little bit. Because generally there isn't, in most of the trailers up until recently, it's only been the male character. However, Fallout 4 is a pretty recent example of where they actually went away from this a little bit. At first, I thought that this game would be the same, where they only had the male character for all their advertising at all. But like 1 week before the game was released, they had at least about 1 week, they had a new trailer come out, and this actually showcased, it's like a flip-flop between the male avatar and the male voice actor, and then the female avatar and the female voice actor, and then it had gameplay for both of those, which I thought was a really cool exception to this bias. And then for Mass Effect 3, there was also, I think, an entire trailer dedicated to the female Shepard, or female Captain Shepard, which is the main character you can play, but there's also an option to choose to play as the female character of that. So other than that, though, I just like if you look through like some popular gameplay, popular role-playing games, you're not really going to find much else for advertising that doesn't showcase the male avatar. So why does this bias exist? Well, so there's an article called that I read called "Why Marketers Fear the Female Geek" that goes into this a lot and also covers some of the stuff we covered in class. And it pretty much stems from like a precedent that was established for that targeted the male aver ah that targeted the male audience right from the beginning of video games. So what happened was that the advertisers and the game companies started trying to select like where are we going to spend our money. We don't really have a whole lot of money to spend on advertising, and they just found that the male audience was more receptive to their advertising. And so it was a pretty successful method, and so they just started just like cutting out the female audience entirely. And the reason why this keeps happening now is because it is successful. It does make them money, and they don't really want to change. It's a very conservative strategy. They know that they'll make money if they do this, and so they don't really want to take risk branching out into other audiences, even though other audiences might still give them a lot of money for this, because as it stands right now, they are still making a lot of money for the male audience, and other audiences like the female audience are still maybe they're not as receptive as female targeted trailers or advertising, but it still kind of works for them because obviously females do buy video games right now. And so yeah, that strategy isn't really that great of one. I think the main reason I don't like it so much is because it's not showing off all of a game's content. Pretty much like half of what the gameplay could be is kind of not really the gameplay, but like there's a whole lot of work that goes into making either a male or a female character. And so if you're only showing off the male version, you're showing off like completely you're not only showing half of the entire like modeling and the voice acting, and that's just like it's a shame because like all of that it's all the other content just isn't getting shown in those trailers. And then here's the big one: it's alienating the female audience. It's not good. So it's pretty obvious right there that just if you keep on targeting this one audience, all your other audiences are going to feel alienated. And so and like I kind of mentioned earlier, then they're not going to be as receptive as they could be toward the trailers for that game. So thank you so much for your time. Here are some photo sources for my pictures that I showed in my slides, and a link if you want to type it all out for the article I read and talked about why marketers fear the female geek on how to not suck at gaming, gamedesign.com. Thank you and goodbye.